Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the magic of curiosity. Curiosity provides us with a magical bridge from whatever state we're in into the space of observer, where we can be more objective and gain insights that might not otherwise have been available if we're on a rant or on an emotional tear. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Looking forward to it. It should be a fun conversation. And good morning, Rosalind, and good morning, Bernadette. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started talking about curiosity, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding into your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel all those sensations, the friction, the heat, the motion, the pressure, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Curiosity. It's sort of a magic formula I've discovered, that if we can muster the presence to be curious, it offers us a way to move beyond the passions of the moment, where we might have gotten sucked into being super reactive or angry or anxious, even, that we can, it gives us an automatic bridge into our observer self. And when we have the ability to observe, it's already an automatic change of state. And so let's look at how that can happen. For instance, if I am feeling sad, rather than digging more deeply into feeling sad, although it's important, I think, to allow yourself to feel the feelings you have, there's a point beyond which we can grow from those feelings too. We process them, and then we can also grow from them to say, wow, what triggered that? Where did that come from? What is this reminding me of in the past that I'm responding to, that may have taken me out of the moment? What am I saying to myself to create this state? So the thing about curiosity is that its benefit and its power is very much reliant upon the quality of the questions that you ask. So we want to make sure we don't want to be asking questions like, what's wrong with me? Those aren't the questions to ask. The questions to ask are questions that might generate new awareness about our process of thinking and feeling. And sometimes it feels like a feeling is coming out of nowhere, rather than asking why questions. Asking what questions, I think, can be more useful, like what triggered me? What what are the associations that I'm making here that are resulting in this feeling of sadness or this feeling of anger? Like why, what, there I am with a why question, but what is it that I'm getting so angry about? You know, what am I thinking? What meaning am I attributing to this situation that I'm getting so reactive around? So for instance, I'm trying to think of an instance where, so an altercation that I had with a family member a while back, and it just really got to me. And I kept looking and looking to see, well, what's going on here that this upset me so much? And there was, it kind of went to a much, much, much older wound of not being seen for who I am, being misinterpreted, being misjudged. So there was the feeling of injustice in the way that I had been perceived, and also a feeling of hopelessness around being able to communicate effectively into a space of judgment. You know, when people hold judgment about us, whatever we say is going to be filtered through that lens of judgment. So sometimes it feels that it's like it's an impossible situation because we can't penetrate that already listening that somebody might have for anything we might say. And that it harkened back to experiences in childhood where I felt powerless. So it was interesting to see this whole dynamic, and then recognizing that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, recognizing what the dynamic is can allow us to be freed from it. You know, to say, oh wow, you know, this isn't about this instance at all. It's about all these other things in the past. And maybe there are inroads here that I hadn't perceived because I fell into this past pattern of resignation. So that's an example. That's an example of where curiosity can be a huge support in our own personal growth. And also curiosity can be a wonderful support in relationship with others, when people are doing or saying things that you don't understand, or that are surprising, or that just get to you. Being curious about their behavior and about what they might be thinking and about where that came from allows us to not be so reactive, and allows us to interact with more neutrality, to actually cultivate connection more deeply. So Bernadette says, food is my pacifier and the blanket that makes me feel comfort. I'm angry that I'm no longer able to have what made me feel safe. Okay, so Bernadette, that's such a loaded conversation in so many ways, right? When we look to comfort food, right? I certainly have done that in my life a lot, and there are consequences to it, right? Oftentimes it's excess weight and health threats because we have looked to fill a a void with food, to comfort ourselves, to fill ourselves up. And it's something that I too have struggled with. And now I understand, due to your health, that you're not supposed to be having the same kinds of foods perhaps that you had before. I'm wondering if there might be healthier choices that could also be cultivated into comfort choices. Um, it's interesting with I've had so many food restrictions due to food sensitivities that a lot of the things that I used to reach to for comfort, not there anymore. But we can maybe find some kind of healthier substitutes. Yeah, so Bernadette says, looking for those types of foods and no success yet. Warm things are really wonderful for me anyway. And I wonder, it might be worth looking into some kind of ceremonial sort of ritual that can be comforting and soothing. Like I just have had exposure to cacao, and there's in the preparation of it, in the ingestion of it, just being ceremonial about it. And it might not even be, it's not that it needs to be that specific thing, but when you create a ritual, that can often be very, very comforting. So Rosalind says, curiosity questions, they help the meaning-making mind. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And they also help to mitigate runaway emotions. So Bernadette continues, understanding helps to dissolve conflict because the veil gets lifted. Exactly. Seeing things the way they are. But when you're not able to reach an understanding to explain things, what curiosity questions help? I often ask myself, what if the thing were already here? What would I be feeling? What would I be saying? What would I be doing? Those questions about what would I be saying? What would I be doing? Yeah, all of those are wonderful questions. They're manifesting questions, right? Because we're evoking and invoking a different state of being, and curiosity, or asking powerful questions, asking powerful and positive questions, really help to put us on a new track. So, for instance, when I've found myself in situations where I felt betrayed or I felt abandoned, I would ask questions like, what would this part of myself need to believe in order to be having these feelings? So to find what is sourcing that experience, like what would someone acting that way need to believe? And then that can give us insights into ourselves. You know, what are the assumptions that are underlying this behavior? What are the things that I'm telling myself? Because often we don't even hear our self-talk. And we work ourselves into all kinds of states. There's a perfect example was, and I think I mentioned this to you already. I was having a session with a client, and when they showed up, they were in a great state of mind. And then they started going on a rant about work. And within a matter of minutes, they were all fired up and rared up and angry and indignant and frustrated and just in a super state. And I stopped them and I said, okay, so how do you feel right now? And they told me that they felt all worked up and aggravated and annoyed. And I said, and how did you feel when you started this call? And they said, mellow. And I said, okay, so is this the way that you want to feel right now? Do you see how this got created? What mechanism created this radical change of state into a state that was truly undesired? And yet it was completely self-manufactured, right? Why? Because it was where we put our attention. And so a question that could be useful is, what might have driven this person to create that state of chaos and discontent? And the interesting thing in looking at that question for this particular person is that experience of chaos was a more familiar experience, and in its familiarity there was some comfort to it. It's very interesting. It's very interesting when things are going well, some of us just throw up roadblocks and create artful maneuvers of self-sabotage. So what's up with that? What's driving that? What creates that? It's not that we're stupid. It's not that we consciously want to do damage. But in many cases, what it is about is that state of not being okay is more familiar to sometimes, to be the screw up is more familiar than to be successful. Maybe we have all kinds of ideas about what it is to be successful, or maybe we have all kinds of ideas about ourselves and not being able, that's not who we are. Maybe these questions of identity. So then we get to look at, well, what would I have to think of myself in order to create this situation? And that can give us an insight into, oh my gosh, that is an old pattern of thought. You can say, well, where did that come from? Oh, I see where that came from. And being aware of it is the first step to being able to shift it. So Bernadette says, fear of change or success because it's unknown. Yes, 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 and yes, Bernadette. It's so interesting how we would rather stay, in so many instances, how we would rather stay in a situation that is incredibly destructive than to step outside of that into something that is an unknown. I remember when I was in college, I was in a relationship, and it wasn't abusive. It's just that it wasn't a good relationship at all. And I remember saying that even though I was unhappy, it was better than facing the unknown of not being in that relationship, and being on my own. It was better than being on my own. And that was a pretty painful revelation, to see how willing I was to sacrifice parts of myself, to settle just for the false security of being in this relationship that wasn't a good relationship for me or the other person. So this fear of change or fear of the unknown is something that we can tend to limit ourselves with profoundly. So in the face of that fear, maybe there are some questions, getting curious. Okay, I'm afraid of the unknown. So is there a memory that triggers, where something that was unknown or something in life shifted so dramatically in an unexpected way that was so disruptive that we made a decision at some point to say, I'm not ever going to let that happen again. So it's this path of inquiry is super powerful. And the thing to be vigilant about is the quality of the questions we ask. So it's not just idle curiosity, although it can be. I mean, maybe there's no such thing as idle curiosity, because curiosity is an active engagement with something, right? Like, to get curious is to create an opening for new potential, new possibility, new information, new awareness. And oftentimes, without training ourselves into some level of rigor around the questions that we ask, we'll ask really destructive questions like, what's wrong with me? That's not the kind of curiosity I'm talking about, because that's really not even curiosity. That's self-punishment. And what we're looking at here is authentic curiosity about, like, what is this dynamic? What is it that's going on here? And what kind of pattern is this, and what might be underlying it? So it was really interesting in my exploration around feeling unlovable. Not so much feeling unlovable, but believing on, and this is remnants, but the remnants matter. Remnants of believing myself to be unlovable. Noticing that if that is a belief, for instance, that we hold about ourselves, we find validation for that, right? We find confirmation of that in our lives. And if that becomes a belief, then what's the outcropping of that? What's a consequence of believing that one is unlovable? It's that we can't then receive love, right? Because that would challenge our belief about ourselves. We can't really receive that love. We can't experience being loved because we've already identified with being unlovable as a beingness. So it's fascinating things, and then it's a matter of, well, what would it feel like? Here's another great question. What would it feel like to experience being loved? And that's a way that we can then generate a way to an inroad to healing. What would it feel like to have someone have their arms around me and for me to feel deeply loved? What would I feel in my body? What would my heart feel like? And this goes back to the questions that you were asking earlier, Rosalind, is like imagining yourself in that situation to be able to experience it. And that's a way that we can begin to heal ourselves also, is to be feeling these feelings that we didn't know how to feel. We can generate them. And it's something that can be generated more effectively with practice over time. Bernadette says consequences would be unobtainable because we don't want to see it. Right, right. So if I don't want to, if I believe that I'm inadequate, there's nothing that anybody else can tell me that's going to let me believe that I'm adequate, right? Like I won't be able to fully receive that. And then what we could do is we can say, well, what would it feel like if I felt adequate? What would it feel like if I really could receive that love? What would it feel like if I really could recognize my strengths and my skills? What would it feel like if I really felt worthy? How would I carry my body? How would I breathe differently? What would my shoulders feel like? So by getting curious in a deliberate way, in a way that is generative rather than iterative, rather than just giving ourselves a way to repeat the same old terrible stories, to be questioning that story is like, oh, that's interesting. Where did that story come from? Is that story true? Is that really true? And to look and question, and so the quality of our questions determines the quality of our experience to a very great degree. And the quality of and the capacity of our thinking is guided by the framework that we're providing for those questions. So as we generate more enriching questions, we can generate a more enriching experience, because our mind wants to answer the questions. So whatever question we ask, we're going to find answers. And if we're asking terrible questions, we're going to find terrible answers, or answers that are really destructive. That happens a lot. So curiosity, guided curiosity, is what we're talking about. And with that, I'm going to call it a morning. So once again, it's always, always, always such a pleasure and privilege to be with you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.